I've seen a lot of talk lately in Christian circles falsely representing the dispensationalist viewpoint. Based on the memes and the videos and the posts, they make it seem like dispensationalism is only about the end times and Israel and war, and that those who hold to that viewpoint they're just obsessed with war and predicting the end times, and they're all about predicting the day when the rapture will happen. But that's not accurate. In actuality, the aspect of the end times, or in particular the idea of the rapture or the tribulation, is only a small portion of dispensationalism. I've seen people go as far as saying that dispensationalism causes damage to churches, or it promotes different ways of salvation, or discourages spreading the gospel, or that it instills scare tactics into people, or even promotes white supremacy. All of those are just completely ridiculous. Hearing all of this just makes me realize how uninformed people are about what they're talking about. It reminds me of the certain people Paul warns Timothy about in 1 Timothy who are confidently wrong about what they teach. If you're going to speak out against a viewpoint, at least spend some time to understand what you're speaking out against. If you're against dispensationalism, listen to the rest of this video. Maybe I can help you to understand it so you can criticize it better. The word dispensation in the Bible comes from the Greek word oikonomia, which means stewardship or administration. In the context of Scripture, it implies a divinely appointed way of managing affairs, particularly God's dealings with humanity. A dispensation is a distinct period in history where God relates to humanity according to a specific plan or arrangement. It's a way of understanding how God's purpose unfolds through different stages, each with its own unique set of rules and expectations and relationships, all the while maintaining the same means of salvation, by grace through faith. In a class I taught on dispensationalism several years ago, I used the analogy of parents and children, which you can use that a lot when talking about God and his people. But the analogy I used was a parent that had maybe 3 or 4 children. And how the parent deals with each child is very different depending on the child's personality or what they like or don't like, or what, their attitude towards things. For instance, me and my brothers, we all are very different, and some punishments that my parents used for me didn't work for me, but they worked for my brother, and vice versa. So a parent has to deal with each individual child in a very specific way. It doesn't change their love for them or how they view them. It just means they have to work with each of the individual people in a different way. That's kind of what a dispensation is. It's God's way of dealing with certain people in certain time periods, certain ways. Dispensationalism is literally just a framework of seeing how God works with different groups of his children in different ways over history, from Eden to eternity. So what are the dispensation? My friend Paul Miles points out that these are unique periods of time in which God tests man's obedience to him. Salvation has always been by grace through faith, so the purpose of these tests is not to save men, but to glorify God. He points out that every dispensation ends with man failing the test and God's judgment. The timeline of dispensations is usually split into 7 or 8 distinct dispensations. For instance, the age of innocence, the age of conscience, the age of civil government, age of patriarchal rule, the age of Mosaic law, the church age, the 7-year tribulation, and the kingdom. I'll briefly go through the different dispensations for you using this little pamphlet that, again, my friend Paul Miles from Grace Abroad Ministries put together to just give a brief overview of what the dispensations are. The first one, the dispensation of innocence. Test, to refrain from eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Failure, Adam and Eve ate. Judgment, sin, death, expulsion from the Garden of Eden, and a curse upon the earth and mankind. The dispensation of conscience. Test, to obey the commands given to Adam using man's knowledge of good and evil as a guide. Failure, global wickedness. Judgment, worldwide destruction with the Great Flood. Lifespans drop from around 1,000 years to around 100 years. The dispensation of civil government. Test, to govern according to the Noahic covenant, including the command to fill the earth. Failure, building the Tower of Babel to avoid dispersion. Judgment, confusion of the languages causing mankind to scatter. The dispensation of patriarchal rule. Test, for Abraham and his descendants to abide in the land God showed them. Failure, leaving the land. Judgment, 400 years of oppression, beginning with Ishmael and ending with the exodus from Egyptian slavery. The dispensation of Mosaic law. Test, for Israel to obey the Mosaic covenant and the prophets. Failure, violation of the law and rejection of the Messiah. Judgment, exiles and eventual postponement of the Messianic kingdom. Dispensation of the church age. Test, to go make disciples of all nations, driving Israel to a righteous jealousy. Failure, neglect of the Great Commission and apostasy of the church. Judgment, the rapture and the judgment seat of Christ, to reward believers for their faithful works. The dispensation of the 7-year tribulation. Test, for Israel to become a purified remnant of faithful believers. Failure, many still reject Christ, and many believers fail to persevere. Judgment, when the Jewish remnant calls on Jesus, he returns and conquers the world. Finally, the dispensation of the kingdom. Test, to live under Christ's rule. Failure, after 1,000 years, the unsaved join Satan's final rebellion against Jerusalem and the saints. Judgment, God crushes the rebellion with fire, ushering in the great white throne judgment for the unsaved. And then into eternity. Yay! So yeah, hopefully this helps you to understand or have a better idea of what dispensations are, or dispensationalism is.